Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to the Birdcage. I'm Jack Kennett, joined alongside my good friend Jackson Tennant to recap Kansas's big road win against TCU. Kansas Jayhawks go into Fort Worth and get a 74-61 victory over the Texas Christian Horned Frogs. The mascot there is a little confusing.
No, it
Jason,
is.
you
Yeah.
watched the game. What were your instant impressions about KU's big win?
I thought it was impressive that KU could rebound after that slow start. I wasn't quite expecting such a tale of two halves like we got.
hmm
And I think we were talking earlier about how KU needed guys like Shaquille Moore, like AJ Storr to step up, and they really did on every level. So a really promising win for KU as the season progresses.
Now, one thing I'm going to ask you before we kind of get into the whole deep body recap is do you think this game says more about Kansas able to come back from a 14-point first half deficit, or does this game maybe say a little more about TCU that they might not be a bottom feeder in the Big 12 and that they can on a good night go out and beat top teams in the Big 12?
It's a good question. Um, I think I'd go with the latter about TCU. I think TCU's shown that they can compete. I mean, they beat Baylor, if
hmm
I'm not mistaken. And, any game in the Big 12 is going to be a dogfight,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's no exceptions usually ever. I mean, if you can, I mean, besides the UCF game, pretty much every game Kansas has been in, they've really had to fight sometimes from underneath. So
Yep.
I think it does show a lot about the parity in the Big 12 and just how prominent of a basketball conference it is. But when you're able to get a road win in an environment like that, not so much the environment, but in the circumstance of a game against the TCU, for example, shows a lot about what Kansas can do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Anytime you can get a road win in college basketball, it's a good day. And I
Yep.
think Bill Self would agree with that. I think Kansas would agree with that. And that's just the truth of the matter.
Hmm.
Anytime you can get a win, it's better than a loss. You would take an
Absolutely.
ugly win over a close competitive loss any day of the week.
Any day. Any
Flory
day.
Badunga,
Yeah.
he's incredible.
Yeah.
First career double-double for the freshman. First question. What did you make of his individual performance? Second question, is he even going to come back another year?
Ooh. Yeah, you do kind of have to start asking that question. First with his individual performance, obviously I thought he played great. The first half he really showed up, and it
Mhm.
definitely felt like when Kansas couldn't get any rhythm going for a sustainable amount of time, Flory was there
Yeah.
as a constant. And the fact that he is that constant presence as a freshman is pretty remarkable to establish yourself like that. Um, and going to your second question, again, it's early, and we need to see how much he develops over the course of this season. But I think
hmm
as of now, I do anticipate him coming back another year. I still think there are areas of his game that he needs to improve on. Right. And then with the portal and everything like that, I'm not sure if you're referring to, professional
Oh
or
yeah, I'm
yeah,
talking
you're
league bound.
you're talking league bound. You know, I, Right now, I would say at least another year. That doesn't mean that he's not going to get there because I think his potential is through the roof. I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't seen a guy with that amount of untapped potential in a while. And he looks like he's going to fulfill that, which is really exciting to see. But
Yeah. He's incredible.
yeah.
10 points, all of which in the first half when Kansas
Mhm.
desperately needed something.
Yes.
He also contributes that with 10 rebounds, three of which on the offensive glass, again, all
Yep.
in the first half when Kansas needed a play.
Absolutely.
And he goes out there on the defensive end where he's really shown that he's a defensive anchor. Four
Yes.
blocks, incredible defense from Flory Badunga, a
Hmm.
plus 27 in the box score. It's
Wow.
it's unheard of
Wow.
for somebody
That's,
who gets the minutes Flory Badunga has gotten
yeah.
majority of this year. Realistically, he is Hunter's backup, who has just
Yeah.
been pushed into this role and is
Uh-huh.
excelling. Now,
Absolutely.
with that being said, he didn't contribute nearly as much in the second half, and
Hmm.
the announcers throughout the game just made it sound like he was gassed. And so, conditioning wise, he might not be there yet, but
Yes,
you hit on the head. The untapped potential with Flory is so high.
it is.
I'm
It is.
praying, and I'm sure most of Kansas faithful are praying that we can get another year or two or three out of number 40. Another
Absolutely.
player who finally broke through, you can say, is AJ Storr.
Yeah,
AJ Storr had a really good game.
he
He had
did.
12 points, and if I'm not being mistaken, one of those points was strictly created off a pick six.
Hmm.
He gets a pick six dunk, and he had
Hmm.
three steals. So
Yeah.
this is the game where we're seeing AJ Storr like break through. They sent AJ to the presser, and he said that he thinks this was his best overall game as a Kansas Jayhawk because of his defensive effort tonight. I
Hmm.
guess not tonight, but on Wednesday.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about AJ Storr's game against TCU and how he can translate this over to games coming up, especially Houston on Saturday?
It's a good question. I loved what I saw from AJ Storr, and I think you know, I think fans were waiting for him to break through because he has the talent, and we were talking
Mhm.
about that last time we chatted about KU hoops, but you didn't know when that was going to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't quite expect it to be TCU. I'm going to be honest. I didn't expect him to play bad, but I mean, for that little stretch in the game when you brought up the fast break dunk, in which I think led to a TCU timeout, which really shifted momentum for Kansas. Um, I mean, he looked like he was one of the best players on the floor. And you
Yeah.
know that he is, you know that he can be. I mean, he's shown that. Last year you watch him at Wisconsin, the guy was a dog. Like, he can do this at a very high level. Um, Kansas is going to need that against Houston. I mean, I think, now it's just about maintaining that consistency and maintaining um that play. But I think if he's able to give Kansas that kind of production, there's not many teams I think that can stand in their way.
And we won't see the AJ Storr we saw at Wisconsin strictly because he doesn't have the ball in his hands enough.
Absolutely.
However, if we can get an AJ Storr that's averaging 10, 12 points a game,
Uh-huh.
competing on the defensive side of the ball and making it hard on opposing defenses,
Uh-huh.
that's all we're asking him to do.
Absolutely.
And this looks like a step in the right direction, and I'm pretty excited to see what he's able to do against Houston on Saturday.
Very much
Now,
so.
one of the last big questions I have before we kind of just get into closing thoughts.
Uh-huh.
What were you thinking about the Hunter Dickinson tie-up? That whole situation, that whole ordeal. What were you thinking?
Look, I think Self hit it on the head. Just a little boneheaded, I think I can understand what he was doing. Obviously, I'm not a mind reader. I can't read his mind, but I get being kind of that instigator, and I think Hunter would even admit that he's played that role before. It was just, I mean, it was whatever. I was seeing that, and I was just like, all right, bro. Like, I get it, kind of, but just I don't know. But hey, Kansas. I mean, it didn't affect Kansas at all, so I can't talk too much crap about it. If Kansas would have, if TCU would have, if that would have sparked a huge TCU run, okay, then yeah, those antics need to stop. But I think certain instances like that aren't the end all be all. But yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't a fan to see that. I was just like, if I was a TCU fan, I'd be like screaming at my TV, just like, I get why he has I get why he has the reputation he has. Hunter, I'm talking about.
Yeah, I feel like Hunter Dickinson has that reputation and he's had that reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is just another instance of Hunter Dickinson being Hunter Dickinson. And like you said, there it comes to a point where you're just like, come on, let's be real.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
the whistle blows, you stop.
Hmm.
However, what I'll take from it is Hunter Dickinson was showing that he cares and he was showing
Yep.
his passion and he was going to show everybody on the court that he's not giving this damn ball up. It was
Hmm.
one Hunter Dickinson versus four or five TCU players.
Yeah.
And as boneheaded as it is, TCU tried to get a bunch of crowd energy, team energy after that play. They used that play to try to spark a bunch of energy in the crowd,
Hmm.
and that didn't happen.
Hmm.
Kansas punched them right back into the mouth. And that's kind of what I'm taking away from it, as TCU had a bunch of energy from this one play. Whether it's Dickinson's fault, whether it's TCU's fault, I'm not one to judge. They both got penalized, I think, accordingly.
Hmm.
But Kansas was able to create their own energy and use it to kind of fight back TCU's. And I'm really impressed with what I saw from Kansas after that play specifically.
Me too. Absolutely. I think, especially on the road, and yeah, like I talked about, a road game in the Big 12 isn't ever going to be easy. You got to play well, and I mean that's a heck of an opportunity for TCU to instigate some sort of comeback, like you said. And Kansas shut it down. You got to give them credit for that, and you got to give Hunter credit for that as well.
Yeah. Now, the last thing that we'll talk about kind of before we get your final thoughts is KJ Adams.
Mhm.
TCU was KJ Adams' second game, sidelined due to a shoulder injury. Was week to week before missing the Kansas State game, and we quite frankly don't really have an update on him unless one's come out recently and I haven't been on the internet. But
I
kind of what
haven't.
I'm asking is hypothetically, he doesn't play on Saturday. When do you think he will return? When he does return, does he come off the bench in place of Flory? What are your whole thoughts around KJ Adams and this whole four position?
I think he certainly comes off the bench his first game back. I feel like that's something that Coach Self would do, and any coach would do. Obviously, it depends on his health, but I certainly anticipate he'll come off the bench when he returns. I honestly don't expect him to be. I don't know if he's going to play against Houston again. We don't really have an update. If he does play, I think he will absolutely have limited minutes.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders whether or not it would hurt Flory if you really insert KJ in back into that lineup and give him the prominent minutes that he was getting. And that's nothing against KJ Adams at all. It's the fact that you got a young player like Flory Badunga who's playing very, very well. He's playing better at this stage than I thought he was going to at the start of the year. I thought he was really good and he had all the potential in the world, but he's getting better every single game.
Yeah.
You don't want to stifle that. You don't want to put barriers in Flory's way for that to not continue. And it might have to come at the expense of some KJ minutes, but I think you could argue with sometimes his presence on the court. His presence is always his biggest strength, in my opinion. I mean, he's just a brute and he's always, defensively, I think Kansas feels that the most. Offensively, I think there's sometimes where when Flory's in the lineup, the offense flows a little better.
Mhm.
Um, so it'll be interesting, but I certainly would expect KJ to play limited minutes in his first and maybe even his second game. And honestly, he might be the sixth man going forward. I don't know.
The way that Flory is able to step up with his absence makes me think they're not going to rush KJ back. They're going to
Yes.
make sure he is 100% ready to go when he does step back out on the floor. I don't think that's going to be Saturday. I'm not a genius. I have no inside sources. That's just my guess.
Hmm.
It's you're able to win a game in an environment like TCU. And now your biggest game of the season, you don't want KJ Adams. You don't want one of your players playing at 60%, 70% health.
Absolutely.
Especially with the way Flory's been playing, I feel like they're going to let him recover at his own speed, make sure he is 100% before they send him back out on the floor. The later half of that question is I just don't know because KJ's made such a big impact on KU basketball over the past 3, 4, 5 years. So you're just sitting there like, what do you really do? The hindsight is there's a player who's better than KJ Adams coming off the bench in Flory. But it's always hard to make that decision. And certainly, I would not want to have to make a decision like that. You couldn't pay me Bill Self money to make a decision as tough as that. Okay, that's a lie. Yes, you could. But
Yeah, I'm about
Um,
to say I
that
would make a lot of decisions if I had Bill Self money.
But that's just that's my whole point is it's a tough decision to
It
make.
is.
So I don't really know where Kansas is going to go with that decision. But it will probably be sometime soon where we see KJ Adams back out on the floor, which is I think a good positive thing for Kansas basketball. We'll just have to see how Bill Self wants to play it. JT, any final thoughts about the TCU game?
Very promising win. A really good win to go into Houston, um, which is probably certainly the biggest conference game of the year. Oh, the Iowa State game, you could argue, but that was also in Ames, and I don't think many people thought Kansas was going to win.
Yeah.
Uh, Anytime Kansas plays in Allen Fieldhouse, you expect them to win. That's just the standard, and it's not going to be easy. But in terms of the TCU win, really, really solid performance from multiple guys. I mean, I think there was five guys in double figures, if I'm not mistaken, maybe six. No, definitely five. And Shaquille Moore, again, I want to like talk about him real quick. I love
Yeah.
his game. I
Yeah.
think he is going to be so crucial for Kansas if they want to really make it a deep run in March. You need those 3-and-D guys. You just do. You need a guy that you glue on to the opposing team's best guard,
Mhm.
and and that and that helps out Dewan. That helps out everybody. So really good performance from Shaq. Really good performance from AJ Storr, Flory, the whole crew. And it's going to be interesting to see how they'll look this tomorrow. Tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah, this is Shaquille Moore is a player that I haven't seen in a Kansas jersey. I mean I've watched Kansas for 2, 3 years now, like pretty in depth.
Yeah,
But he provides such a spark.
yeah, he
And
does.
whether he starts the rest of the year or comes off the bench, it's just something about Shaquille Moore on the court that excites Kansas fans. He does so much out on the floor. And what I'll say is, as good of a basketball player he is, he's a better talker. He's very well spoken
Mhm.
in the press conferences. He handles every question like a grad senior, like he is. It's impressive, really is. He's well spoken. He talks about his teammates. He talks about his coaches. He talks about everyone very highly. And he's a hard worker. And when he's out on the floor, he's going to be giving you 100%. So I really like what Shaquille Moore, the excitement and the energy that he's brought into Kansas basketball the past few weeks. And I think that when Shaq's out there, he'll be able to do something special for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What were your score predictions for the Houston game tomorrow? Before we let you go.
Yeah. Gonna be a relatively low scoring affair, if I had to guess. Although I said that last year and it ended up being a bit more high scoring than I thought.
Two top
Um,
five, two top five defenses. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think Kansas will win.
hmm
Don't think it'll be blowout or anything like that. If I had to guess, say something around 65-58. I think they win by seven.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 65-67 Kansas win all-time game at Allen Fieldhouse. I just think with these two teams meeting in the position that they are, this game actually has an imp or a case to be one of the greatest games ever in Allen Fieldhouse
It
between the
could.
two legendary head coaches. 65-67 Kansas win. We will have a preview and recap for that Houston game coming up pretty shortly. Thank you, JT. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Always good talking to you, Jack.
Oh, yes.